thank you. So I teach at Strathmore Business School. I teach entrepreneurial finance. But mostly for the last 2 years, we have a company called Victoria Solutions. We've been working with the different incubators, accelerators in Nairobi, just looking at different startups. So we've seen the evolution, participated in the different competitions that are there for the different startups. So for the last 2 years, we've seen a very good evolution in what's happening with the different startups. So I teach mostly in entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial finance, and we help a bit of the startups on coaching, mentoring, and raising finances.
Excellent. Right into it, probably I'll start. I think some of the ideas that are presented in this category, one of them that stands out for me is BoxBuzz, because I'm one of those guys who got my first post office box when I was straight out of college, and therefore I lived in one side of town. It needed to be accessible, and I currently live on the other side of town, which is light years away. And yes, it's highly frustrating to go to the post office and you find marketing material. So for me, that kind of like makes sense for me. And at least from a Kenyan perspective, we have seen the post office lose meaning in our lives. We no longer send postcards, we no longer send long, mushy, perfumed letters. It's a random text, I love you, or some funny avatar, things like that. So they've kind of like lost relevance. So this could almost be embraced, like drawing back business to them, and at least opening up a channel for value addition. Because we also know the problem with in Africa is that of, say, last mile in e-commerce. I just ordered t-shirts from Threadless, and they got stolen somewhere. Probably they got to the post office, and someone kind of like just felt it and said, this feels like t-shirts, and now in my t-shirts, but thank God for insurance. And they've been ordered again, and I'm waiting. And I never get to know, because for some of these places, they never have tracking. So for me, BoxBuzz has a buzz.
Yeah, it definitely has a buzz. But before that, let me just mention something that, I mean, every person who came on stage was really, really energetic, just speaking about the startup and everything. And of course, I was looking at the different startups, and there was like two categories. You could tell there were some guys who were really addressing the local problem and really going deep into a particular problem. And then you had the guys who were really looking at the global market and just saying, we're hitting the whole market as a whole, which for me was very interesting. Of course, now getting into BoxBuzz, again addressing a very local problem, which then is still a emerging markets problem. And the beauty that I like about them is that it's not just about the post offices. It's the many verticals they could take. I mean, when I was just chatting with them on their booth earlier on, they're just mentioning that at the end of the day, even if you go to a company and you have different pigeonholes, I mean, you always go and find all these mails which have been sitting there, nobody's ever checked them. And of course, that's another vertical they could look at. There's quite a bit of stuff to do around that. And really, if you look at it, it's for the individuals. We don't use a PO box so much, but for the companies, they use that quite often. And it saves quite a bit of time when you know that you can just be able to check for some of those things just from your office and know when a mail has been delivered. So I think they're onto something.
Notify. I think they're thinking next level, because we've been looking at all these platforms from Line, from WhatsApp, and people have been trying to think, how do we start using platforms like this to reduce the cost of transactions? The thing is that SMS has been the cash cow for mobile operators. And from a personal experience, I was actually thrown out of a mobile operator for daring to push the notion that you could have a service similar to WhatsApp that, quote unquote, they said, you want us to cannibalize our cash cow, you want us to kill our cash cow. And what's happened years later, I mean, the eventual thing has happened. The market forces just decided that this is the way to go. So I think it's a smart way, because we're still looking at the need for what you call enterprise to consumer messaging, which I think that addresses very beautifully. When I saw it, I actually thought of one application that was pretty cool, because I saw more of PwC and the blue chips, but I think for the consumer segment, it would be amazing. If I have a loyalty scheme with a supermarket, for example, and I say, okay, I'm a guy, just send me when you have offers on soap, shoes, and toiletries. We haven't gotten that granular yet these guys are sitting on such amazing data sets that a system like that would make it very easy. If I use a local example, some of the outlets at Nakumatt see close to 1 million in terms of foot traffic on a day. Now, how many of those have been, they haven't yet gone to the second level of being able to create a very seamless solution to like communicate with their clients. And I think something like Notify can address that in a very big way.
Yeah, most certainly. In fact, what I really like is when the pitch was ending, the guy mentioned that they're not looking for just cash. They're looking for guys to take them to the next level.
So I could take them to the next level.
Well, I think well, you'd have to write a check also, and you'd be able to walk them to all the
No,
partners.
I've met a couple of VCs. I will just get the money from them, and
Well, at the end of the day, I don't think with the partnership angle, really, you want to get someone who's going to walk you into, as you mentioned, North America, walk into Europe, walk into several African countries almost all at once, be able to knock into the different multinational companies you're speaking about. So you need a partner who's going to walk into all these different places. And I mean, for me, what I like about it is really, at the end of the day, it's not seeking to just, it's not seeking to just forget about the SMS message. It goes, as you mentioned earlier, about telcos. They've also realized how the market looks like.
Yeah.
That the market right now is also about data. So if you look at guys like Safaricom, look at other mobile providers, they're not just looking at it from just one angle of just, let's just use our voice, let's use our SMS. And so these guys may seem like a threat, quote unquote, but that's where the market is moving at the end of the day. And the fact that they want to conquer the entire world, if you want to call it that, for me, I find that amazing, because there's a number of startups that, of course, we've heard of, that are also looking at things on a very local perspective. And if you're going to be looking for VC, if you're going to be looking to exit at some point, you need to be looking at not just Africa, but the whole world. And I love that energy about them.
Go Metro made me smile. It's not often you come across an app that's locally done, whether it's in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Kenya, that has 450,000 daily users. I had that amount, that figure, and you go back to it and say, no, confirm. There's when you look at the metrics from Angry Birds,
they need to address, first of all, that South African market, and perhaps now start looking at other markets much later. Because then there's quite a number of issues that you have in there when you go into a market like Kenya. Public transport is not as very well sorted. There's just too many people operating within the operator, because in South Africa with the rail system you probably have like one operator, so it's very easy to push information around that. But when you have so many people, you may run around too much before you're able to really get a business running.
In the audience today is my second and last boss. It's called Ken Njoroge, and right now he runs a company called Seviland that does, they went to the mobile commerce space. And when I saw Mduka's presentation, it took me back to 2004 when we tried building a system for distributing content where you'd actually give vendors a handset and you'd use SMS to place the order. And the sole reason why it didn't succeed was that the networks, for lack of a better word, were just rubbish. You'd walk in and you'd order. If you're the customer, you come into my shop. I'm even a shoe shiner, and I hear you whistling a certain song. I tell you, I can give you that as a ringtone. And then, of course, you buy it off me. I've already paid the money here. But now the networks are so slow. I've finished shining your shoes, and you're there. Now you start tapping your shoe because you're waiting for the ringtone to arrive. And that just killed that particular line. And you saw from the live demo here, I'm walking out to a shop, I'm purchasing airtime, and my phone beeps instantaneously. I mean, I think for some of these ideas, sometimes it's a matter of time for the market to mature in terms of supporting infrastructure. But I think someone like Mduka, depending on how they position themselves in the market, they can actually grow pretty big. And if they're just going even to make money per transaction, I think they're going to put some serious volume.
Yeah, and for me also something fascinating around them is the fact that, with most people you want to get the partnership with the big dog.
Yeah.
You want to get Safaricom on board fast before you can be able to do something. But with them, they went in and just said, okay, people usually go and buy airtime on large scale. They get a discount. They came in at that particular point where really they just looked at the system as it was and tried to work with it from that perspective. And that is what entrepreneurship is all about. It's really just looking at the system, not at times trying to change everything, but just looking at the loopholes in there. And that's fascinating, because after that, as is mentioned, they've signed up, or rather they have a partnership with some of the big players, and I'm sure they didn't get the partnership first. They had to first of all prove that the model actually does work, and then after that start using that. And then of course the other aspect of the verticals we're talking about, it's not just about just one angle. They could also go to a particular company that is selling airtime to its employees. I think he mentioned something around some AIG, that they work with AIG also. Yeah, so just looking at as many verticals, but then also just trying to look at the system and ask yourself, where can we pinpoint, where can we be able to address a particular problem without necessarily having to sign everybody, because nobody's going to sign you up if you haven't done anything yet.
Probably in closing sense, I think we've gone a bit over time. For Juiced, I feel that the market might not be Africa yet, because we're not such a big gaming, a big virtual goods sort of market. My take is if you could sneak your way into China somehow, and be on one of the apps that's being rolled out there, or some of the larger markets for whom that data is not hard to come across, and position yourself in that market. I think that space can explode. Because enough times, locally, for a lot of local devs that I've interacted with from Kenya, SA, and Uganda, you build an app, but half the time, all the traffic comes from India, Philippines, all these other countries, except home. So probably that's where that growth will.
Yeah, most certainly. And if you speak to Waliaula and team, they'll tell you that if from the people who are using the application, it's not mostly the people from the local market, the African market. They've got a bit of people from the jurisdiction you just mentioned. And that's the beauty, that they're building a platform. It's not a game that they're building. And with that platform, there's no stopping who's going to use that. And for businesses like those, then the aspect of partnerships becomes very important. And so these are the guys who will not just be looking for an investor to come in, but rather an investor who's going to walk them into these other markets very easily. Because they just need a check, they need someone who's going to really open those other doors. So I think, and chatting from here with him earlier, he was just mentioning that also that for them, really they are getting some guys on board who are going to walk into these large markets.
Excellent. So Steve, it's been a pleasure. Kindly engage these guys more at the demo pit. We might not have addressed all the issues, whether the market opportunities or the challenges, and kindly do that, because that feedback will be important for this particular cohort as we look at probably getting them over the $8 million of value that the previous cohort managed to raise.